Welcome to Means of Grace, a podcast produced by the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church.
Welcome to this episode of the Means of Grace podcast. My name is Brian Mateer, and I'm the Director of Missional Engagement for the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church. In my role, I have the privilege of working with some of our international mission partners in our conference. 2023 marks a significant milestone for one of our longest-standing mission partners. Project Agape recognizes 30 years of mission and ministry with the people of Armenia. As we celebrate on our past efforts, we also look forward to what God may be doing among us in North Carolina and with our friends in Armenia. We have set out looking for new ways to invite clergy and laity into the work of Project Agape. Earlier this year, we offered our first pilgrimage to Armenia for young clergy and laity. Christianity spread to the country as early as 40 AD, a movement attributed to the apostles Thaddeus and Bartholomew. It became the first official Christian state in 301 AD, 36 years before Constantine the Great was baptized. WNCC clergy and lay members visited ancient Christian sites, learned about the Armenian Apostolic Church, spent time in reflection and in prayer, and experienced the ministry efforts of Project Agape. On today's episode, we hear a reflection on Armenia from Reverend Savannah Glover, pastor of Central United Methodist Church in Concord, North Carolina. Hi, Savannah. Welcome to the Means of Grace podcast. Thanks for spending some time with us today and sharing about your reflections from the young adult trip to Armenia.
Of course. Happy to be here.
Tell us a little bit about what motivated you to join the pilgrimage and maybe some of your hesitations or excitement about the trip.
Yeah, so I am in the start of my second year of full-time ministry, which means that when I went on the pilgrimage, I was coming to the close of my first year. Mm-hmm. So I was on the lookout for a continuing education travel opportunity that would also allow me to connect with other people in the conference. Mm-hmm. And my husband and I attended a leadership conference in January of 2023, and we met someone who was going on the trip / leading the pilgrimage to Armenia. And he kept us in the loop about the trip opportunity. And we decided that it was a great chance to travel and to learn.
Sure. And
to connect specifically with young clergy in the Western North Carolina Conference, but then just generally to build community within the conference itself.
Yeah. One of the things that was part of the pilgrimage was for you to spend some time reflecting on what you're seeing and your experiences. So I know you had some time to journal, and you wrote some things after returning from the trip. And one of the things that you wrote that kind of stuck out to me and to others was you talked about this wobbly place of spirituality. Tell us what you meant by that, and maybe how the pilgrimage was impactful for you in that wobbly place.
Sure. Well, I think as a young clergy, specifically in my first year of full-time ministry, I have tried to find ways and practices to maintain a healthy spiritual life. And I think the monotony of going to work every day and leading worship every Sunday and just the day-to-day frustrations that can bring about really did keep me from being able to build a regular spiritual practice. Mm-hmm. And because of that, I felt a little bit stuck and unstable in my spiritual life. Mm-hmm. And I think going on this pilgrimage was a really unique opportunity to experience God in surprising and beautiful ways in nature and in community, that coming home has allowed me to sort of re-energize my spiritual life and has continuously reminded me to be on the lookout for God in all of the places, that God can show up in the ordinary and the extraordinary. God can show up on the top of a monastery in the middle of Armenia, and God can show up at my desk at work in Concord, North Carolina. But I think it took going on the trip to be reminded of that.
Yeah. Talk about maybe this extraordinary experience, was there a moment on the trip that seemed extraordinary that really sticks with you after returning home?
There was. It was in our second week of the trip, the pilgrimage. We were stationed in Yerevan, the capital of Armenia, but we had taken a day trip to Lake Savannah and went to a monastery there called Savannah. And Savannah sits on a peninsula on Lake Savannah, and you can walk up to the monastery as well as walk out to the end of the peninsula. And Lake Savannah is a beautiful blue-green, massive body of water. And then to walk to the end of the peninsula, you walk through beautiful fields of yellow flowers. And I sat up there for probably an hour. And it was towards the end of the trip, so I got to sit up there in the midst of God's creation and think about the experiences that I'd had up to that point, preparing to go back home and thinking about how would I articulate this to people when I get home. And I think in that moment, God just reminded me that I didn't have to think about all those things. I could just be present and be with God in that moment. And that is one of the more impactful moments of the trip for me.
Yeah, you speak of, you're returning home, but in your writing, you also spoke of your returning home spiritually. Talk to us about that and what that was like.
I think the homecoming aspect of the trip for me really came about in our interactions with the Project Agape staff. We spent the first week on site with Project Agape, and they cooked every meal for us and they took care of us. And I think specifically around the table, it was really moving and beautiful to see these strangers who spoke a completely different language embrace us with a radical hospitality and sharing those meals and having conversations and laughing and listening to music really just felt like home to me.
Yeah. All of the pilgrims and myself included, who wasn't on this trip but has been before, have talked about the hospitality and what we've learned and what we've taken away from receiving hospitality. Oftentimes we are, as church leaders, are ones that give hospitality, but to be the recipient of that was powerful and also memorable, I think. Absolutely. For me. You mentioned a lot about Project Agape and some of the things that you learned about there. What have you been able to do to bring that home to your congregation, or what have you been involved in since returning home that supports Project Agape?
So I haven't done anything specifically with Project Agape yet, but I have presented to my church about my pilgrimage experience and have articulated opportunities for further involvement. My church has a lot of involvement in missions already, so I'm not really sure how, willing they're going to be to just jump right in. But I think being able to share with them my experience of the pilgrimage itself, as well as specifically our interactions with Project Agape, at least gave them a framework of here's another place that we could plug into on a more conference level as well as a global level missionally.
I know that you and your husband Noah helped out at annual conference with packing clothing and other supplies that are eventually going to be shipped to Armenia, and also some of the Christmas boxes you learned and saw some of on the other end, the recipients, or at least the distribution points of that. So can you share a little bit how that, what that felt like to know that people in North Carolina are thinking about people in Armenia, and there's this whole system of how that gets to those in need in Armenia?
Sure. Well, while we were in Armenia, we got the chance to see the warehouse where those shipments get unloaded and then redistributed to Project Agape headquarters. So it was really cool to go from standing in that warehouse and seeing the materials and the boxes and the donations from North Carolina, and then getting to return home and almost immediately go help pack those same materials for a new shipment, and to just sort of almost have 2 feet in both camps. And I think it was really moving for me to have that hands-on experience on the ground here in North Carolina, and hopefully return to Armenia and have the same hands-on experience, perhaps distributing those boxes to people in need.
One thing about that I want you to reflect on is pilgrimage as a spiritual discipline. Oftentimes we think of spiritual disciplines as maybe, daily or weekly practices, but pilgrimage is really different. So how was that meaningful for you, or maybe different in your spiritual walk than in some of the other spiritual disciplines that you practiced?
Yeah, I think when I was on the pilgrimage in Armenia, one thing that I really struggled with was, how do I communicate the experience of pilgrimage when I return home? Because some people don't know what pilgrimage is. Some people may have an idea of what it is. And then some people thought I was on a mission trip, and some people thought I was just on a trip. Mm-hmm. So how do I come home and find the balance of sharing my experience with the congregant who wants to hear about my trip as they pass me in the receiving line on their way to lunch after church? And how do I articulate it with people who want to sit down over a meal and look at pictures and hear the stories? And that was a real struggle for me, because I wanted not only to do the pilgrimage justice, but I wanted to do justice to my spiritual experience. Mm-hmm. And I had the opportunity to preach on pilgrimage. And I think what I've continued to reflect on and to ponder since coming back from Armenia is that pilgrimage is not a one-time experience. It's not a journey that started when I got on the plane in Charlotte and landed in Armenia, or got on the plane in Armenia and landed back in Charlotte. It really is a lifelong journey. And I think as long as we, as Christ followers, are pursuing the heart of Jesus, we are on a pilgrimage, and we may never reach a specific destination. Who knows? But we are loving our neighbors, and we are serving those around us as we keep our eyes fixed on Jesus. And I think that is the arc of the pilgrimage journey.
Thank you, Savannah, for your time and for your reflections on Armenia and the pilgrimage to Armenia. And we look forward to hearing more from you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Means of Grace podcast. If you are interested in learning more about a pilgrimage to Armenia to be offered in the fall of 2024, please contact Brian Mateer at bmateer@wnccumc.org, or visit Project Agape on the Mission Engagement page of the conference website. Also, if you would like to learn more about Project Agape and celebrate 30 years of mission and ministry in Armenia, please join us from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. on October 21st, 2023 at Mount Pleasant UMC in Greensboro. An Armenian-inspired lunch will be provided. Details and registration are available through the Conference eNews communications.
Thank you for listening to Means of Grace, a podcast produced by the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church. We hope you enjoy listening to these podcasts and use them as a way to stay connected to our community. Remember to subscribe to Means of Grace for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Please leave us an honest rating and a review. It helps others find this podcast. Follow the WNCC on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at WNCCUMC. Once again, that's at WNCCUMC. Means of Grace is produced by the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church and Andy Go of Gojo Studios.